It is no secret that the Nintendo Switch was a massive success and it deserved every bit of it. It had a fantastic library of games with consistent first and third party support. Although the Switch One had very impressive software sales, not every game quite hit the mark. Nintendo got extra experimental this generation with some titles, some paid off and were genuinely genius gimmicks that worked so well. But the same can't be said for Nintendo Labo. This was such a weird time where Nintendo started charging $70 for cardboard, and I flippin' bought it, baby. The overall idea of Nintendo Labo was very unique and creative. You build a variety of different objects from cardboard and then use your system to play with them, like the piano, the robot kit, or the motorbike. I still use a Nintendo Labo motorbike to ride to work every day. Building the different kits was the best part for me. The feeling of finishing off your creation and that funky music playing was very rewarding. But after that, there wasn't really much to do. The various games you could play, if we can even call some of them games because they just felt like half-baked tech demos, were good for about 5 minutes before you got bored and moved on. Where Nintendo Labo peaked was the VR kit, the final Labo release. This was Nintendo's first shot at VR since the Virtual Boy, but it wasn't like them going all in and making a super expensive headset like Sony or Meta. No, it was just made from cardboard and you had to hold it up yourself because it didn't have a strap and it gave you terrible motion sickness after about 30 seconds because putting your eyes this close to a 720p screen is never a good idea. This was my first experience with Labo and it was fun for a little while, and I do appreciate how they added extra VR modes to some other games like Breath of the Wild, Odyssey, and even Smash Ultimate. But again, you try it for a little while, go, this is kind of cool, get a fat headache, and then just move on. There were cheaper bundles available, but still, trying to justify people to spend this amount of money on cardboard is always going to be a tough sell. The lack of replayability, boring minigames, and gimmicky feel Nintendo Labo had was ultimately why it failed. The last known sales figures for all 4 of the kits combined was 1.39 million units. Not the worst, but when you take into consideration this is basically 4 separate games combined, it wasn't the big success Nintendo were hoping for. Massive respect though to Nintendo for trying this out and experimenting with this idea. I want to make it crystal clear, I don't hate Labo. I have a soft spot for it because it's just so silly, and I did enjoy the little time I had with it. Maybe it could have succeeded if they approached it in a different way, like if they did it with snow or something and you had to play the game inside a giant fridge. I don't flippin' know. You have to have a big house for this one. This is another weird experiment and didn't do the worst, but when I say failed, it doesn't always necessarily mean it sold bad. Firstly though, for Mario Kart standards, it is the worst performing one, and it's understandable why. It's not really a typical video game compared to the others, and for you to be able to play this game, you need to race around with the RC car, meaning you need lots of space to have a good enough track. Again, it's a neat idea being able to create your own Mario Kart tracks and race around your own home, placing real obstacles in the way, and it's always funny seeing pets get involved. I mean, it's basically like the Mario Maker for Mario Kart. But there were a lot of requirements to play this game properly, some that people just simply couldn't control, like having the right amount of space in your home. It feels like once you set up a few tracks and raced around them, you've kind of done everything and will just want to go back to classic Mario Kart. Realistically, there's only so many courses you can do in your home before you run out of ideas, unless you live in some mansion or something. It's fun for the novelty, but it was also £100. It was pretty expensive, but it was a neat idea and it didn't sell the worst for what it is. But I have a feeling Nintendo would have carried this on and probably released more characters if it did perform better. This one really hurts because I love Sushi Striker, And I also love Sushi. Sushi Striker: The Way of Sushido was originally supposed to be a 3DS exclusive. I mean, it was revealed as such. You can kind of tell by the gameplay. And I do think it does control better on the 3DS with the stylus and dual screens. But I don't blame them for making a Switch version last minute, because it probably would have performed even worse if it only launched on the 3DS, as all of the late stage 3DS games, unless you're Pokemon, were always at a disadvantage, especially with this being a brand new IP. This of course was because all of the attention was on the brand new Nintendo Switch. You see, with Sushi Striker, the gameplay is simple and fun. I love the Saturday morning cartoon art style. The cutscenes are great, the story is funny. I saw so much potential in this game, and it genuinely could have done really well. The reason it didn't was simply because of the price. The Switch version to this day is £40/$50. That is insane. Definitely overpriced for what it is, and I don't blame people for skipping this one. I genuinely think this game would have performed much better if it had launched as a $30 game. It's a brand new IP. Not everyone is going to want to spend that much money on a game they don't even know if they are going to enjoy. Yeah, there was a demo, but still, it's originally a 3DS puzzle game. So I have no idea what they were thinking with the pricing of this. A very silly move. I know this is more second party than first party, but still, I could have seen this getting a sequel if it did well, but the only people they have to blame is themselves, because everyone has pretty much forgotten about this game, which is such a shame, because it is so much fun. Are you really surprised about this one? I think it is unfair to say 1-2 Switch is a failure, because it actually sold pretty well, but that was purely because it was a launch title. It definitely failed reception-wise though, and let's be real, it should have been a pack-in title. But everybody 1-2 Switch, the sequel nobody wanted, was absolutely a failure, and for good reason. We all heard the rumors that this game had been complete for a while, but Nintendo just simply didn't know what to do with it. The reason why was because of how bad the feedback was from the people who actually tried the game out. The fact that they were just sat on this game for that long, unsure what to do with it because everyone thought it was terrible, is a sign that this game should have just been scrapped. But I guess they just thought, well, the game's done, let's just quietly release it and hope we at least get our money back. So a trailer was shadow dropped, and not long after the game released, and was pretty much forgotten instantly. There isn't any concrete sales data for everybody 1-2 Switch. I'm not surprised, but it's safe to say it was a flop. The only time I heard about this was when people were just saying how bad it was, or were just laughing at the stupid horse. I honestly just remember seeing this game on clearance within a month of its release. I don't think we will hear from the 1-2 Switch series again, at least I hope we don't, and I'm glad. Bring back Nintendo Land instead, an actual good game that deserves a sequel. This was just a case of bad timing. WarioWare Move It wasn't a bad game, and it felt like a nice follow-up to Smooth Moves for the Wii. I always enjoy WarioWare games and pick most of them up whenever they launch. However, I do feel like this series needs a little bit of a break. Maybe give us a new Wario Land instead. It's just been way too long, but I'm getting sidetracked. The reason WarioWare failed wasn't because it was a bad game, but because it came out in between two juggernaut releases that had been highly anticipated for years. I am of course talking about Mario Wonder and the Mario RPG remake. 2023 was jam-packed with Mario games in general because it was the year the movie came out and Nintendo wanted to cash in on this. I really feel like WarioWare could have benefited greatly from releasing just a few months later. It was the second worst retail launch for WarioWare in Japan and was the only Mario spin-off on Switch to not hit 1 million sales in the first year. Again, wrong place, wrong time. You put a smaller game squeezed in between a 2D Mario game, the first proper new one we've had in over a decade, and the remake of a beloved classic. It's gonna be overshadowed. What did you expect? This series is just cursed at this point. Advance Wars for the GBA was released September 10th, 2001 in America and was planned to be released in Japan and Europe later on. But due to the attacks we all know happened around this time, it was delayed in other regions and never actually got released in Japan. The sequel was also cancelled in Japan and they only saw the original two games in a compilation released in 2004. The final game, Days of Ruin, was also cancelled in Japan but was later released for Club Nintendo members and was playable on the 3DS. The last release for Advance Wars was 2008 and it seemed like Intelligent Systems were done with this series as Fire Emblem was taking off. But out of absolutely nowhere, a remake of Advance Wars 1 and 2 was announced in E3 2021 with a release for December 2021. It got delayed until April 2022 to just add some extra polish, but then due to real world events and the theme of war in Advance Wars, Nintendo understandably delayed the game until further notice. And a year later, after 2 delays, Nintendo finally decided to release it in April 2023, but sadly, the hype had died down and everyone pretty much forgot about it apart from myself and like 10 other people. So sadly, but unsurprisingly, it flopped and most likely killed the series once and for all. It also seems like this didn't get a release in Japan again, which definitely didn't help for sales, and it releasing a few weeks before Tears of the Kingdom also didn't help, and the price probably should have been a bit lower. It's a shame because these are genuinely good remakes. The visuals are great, the gameplay is still fun, and I was hoping this would be a success so the series could continue or at the very least have more remakes for the DS games. But I don't think that will ever happen. Did anyone else forget this one exists? I remember hearing years and years ago that a sequel for Detective Pikachu was in the works for the Switch, like towards the start of the Switch's life. I'm talking like, wasn't it around Sword and Shield time? I remember hearing about this. But with it being so long and us not hearing anything, I just assumed it was cancelled. But when it was revealed, oh my God, did it look bad. This must have been a 3DS game at some point because the graphics just look so bad. I was hoping at the very least this would look really pretty like a new Pokemon Snap or something, but no, this just looks terrible. It also came out at just a weird time. They maybe should have waited until the new movie, which is also taking a very long time to release. Sales wise, it seemed to do okay for a little while and was topping the Japanese charts, but we really haven't heard much since. I don't think it performed the best overseas, and I remember seeing it discounted again quite early on in the game's life, which is never a good sign. Regardless of the sales, it failed in my eyes compared to other Pokemon spin-offs and the impact the first game had. This last one is kind of weird. All things considered, this game performed pretty well. It seems to have sold around 1.27 million copies from the last we heard. Yeah, compared to the huge success of the DS games, it's not the best, but that will probably be because it skipped a huge market. America. I still don't know why it skipped the US. It really makes no sense at all, and it's kind of annoying because if it sold this well without the US sales, it could have potentially doubled the sales, maybe even more if they marketed it properly and treated it as a proper release. I don't think it would have done as well as the DS games, but you would think with how well this series has done in the past, Nintendo would give it some respect and try and give it a proper push. It was a pretty fun game too. I remember playing it daily for quite a few months. It's one of the only Switch games that actually makes use of the IR sensor. The Dr. Mario inspired minigame is quite fun, and I love getting told that I'm stupid from this fat giant floating head. Again, it does feel quite harsh to say this game failed. It really did well, all things considered, but compared to the DS games, it definitely underperformed. But it almost feels like Nintendo just didn't have any confidence in it, and I don't know why. Now, if you'll excuse me, instead of looking back at Nintendo games that failed, I'm going to look in the mirror at the biggest failure of them all.
unless